The jungle moon of Kepler 442c burned with the wreckage of the human research vessel UES Horizon. Smoke rose from twisted metal scattered across the green canopy like broken teeth. The attack had come without warning from the Vorthic Empire ships that appeared from hyperspace like hungry wolves. Jake Morrison crawled from beneath a fallen tree trunk that had saved his life when the ship broke apart during the crash. His marine uniform was torn and dirty, but he was alive. Blood ran down his forehead from a cut above his eye. He wiped it away and looked around at the alien forest that would either hide him or kill him. The trees were massive, things with purple bark and leaves that moved without wind. Strange sounds came from everywhere around him. Clicks and whistles and deep rumbling noises that made his skin crawl. This was not Earth, and everything here wanted him dead. Jake had trained for survival situations, but never on an alien world. He pulled his combat knife from his boot and checked his gear. A small emergency pack with basic supplies. A broken radio that sparked when he tried to use it. His sidearm with 2 magazines of ammunition. Not much to stay alive with on a hostile planet. High above the canopy, a Vorthak hunting ship moved slowly through the sky. Jake knew they would send someone down to look for survivors. The Vorthak never left enemies alive. They were the apex predators of the galaxy, and they made sure everyone knew it. Zrak stood 9 feet tall in the transport bay of the hunting vessel. His black scales gleamed under the ship lights. Razor-sharp claws extended from his massive hands as he checked his weapons. Yellow eyes with vertical pupils scanned the jungle below through the viewscreen. This would be an easy hunt. The human ship had carried researchers and a few military escorts. Soft prey animals from a world the Vorthak called a Deathworld as a joke. Earth was hostile to most galactic species, but the creatures that lived there were weak, no claws or fangs or natural armor. Just pink skin and small teeth. Pathetic, Warlord Kethfer approached Zrak with heavy footsteps that shook the deck. He was even larger than the hunter, with scars covering his arms from countless battles. The scans show 1 survivor in Sector 7, a single human male. Make it quick and bring me proof of the kill. Zrak H nodded and activated his armor systems. Enhanced strength flowed through his muscles. His senses sharpened until he could smell the metal and fear from the crash site kilometers below. It will be done within the hour. The drop pod launched from the ship and burned through the atmosphere like a falling star. Zrak felt the familiar excitement of the hunt building in his chest. This human would run and hide and beg for mercy. Before the end. They always did. Jake heard the sonic boom as something entered the atmosphere. He moved deeper into the jungle, staying low and quiet. The marine training kicked in as he found a stream and followed it downstream to mask his scent. Trail. Whatever was coming for him would have enhanced senses. The water was warm and had a metallic taste. Strange fish with too many eyes swam away as he waded through the current. Everything on this world looked wrong, but Jake forced himself to focus. Panicking would get him killed faster than any alien predator. He found a cave behind a waterfall and checked it carefully for dangerous animals before going inside. The space was small but dry. Jake opened his emergency pack and took inventory. Water purification tablets. Emergency rations for 3 days, a basic medical kit. Survival gear. Designed for Earth environments that might not work here. The sound of trees breaking came from the direction of the crash site. Heavy footsteps moved through the forest with purpose. Jake's pursuer had arrived and was following his trail. Zrak H landed near the wreckage and immediately picked up the human scent. Fear and blood and something else he could not identify. The trail led toward the stream, which showed the prey had some basic survival knowledge. Not that it would matter. The hunter moved through the jungle like a force of nature. Trees bent aside as his massive frame pushed through the undergrowth. His claws left deep marks in the bark as he tested the scent trail. The human was moving downstream toward the hills. Jake left the cave as quietly as possible and climbed higher into the rocks above the waterfall. He needed to see what was hunting him. From his hiding spot behind a boulder, he watched the jungle below. Zrak emerged from the trees. Jake felt his blood turn cold. The creature was a nightmare made real. Black scales covered muscle and bone designed for killing. Yellow eyes swept the area with predator intelligence. This was death walking through the forest, but Jake was a Marine and Marines did not give up. He studied his enemy and looked for weaknesses. The alien was big and strong, but size could be a disadvantage in thick jungle. Those claws were deadly up close, but useless at range. The creature moved with confidence that suggested it had never faced real resistance from prey. Jake slipped away from his hiding spot and moved deeper into the hills. He needed distance and time to think. This was not a fight he could win with direct confrontation. The enemy had all the advantages in strength and weapons and armor, but Jake had something else. He had grown up on a world that tried to kill everything that lived on it. Earth had taught him that the strongest did not always survive. Sometimes the smartest or the most stubborn or the most adaptable were the ones who lived to see another day. The hunt had begun, but Jake Morrison was not going to be easy prey. He was going to make this alien predator work for every step. The jungle was hostile to both of them, and Jake intended to use that fact. Zraked reached the waterfall and paused. The scent trail continued up into the rocks, but something felt different. The human was not running in blind panic anymore. There was purpose in the trail now. Planning. The hunter smiled and showed rows of sharp teeth. Perhaps this prey would provide more entertainment than expected before the inevitable end. Zrakth began climbing toward the hills where his quarry waited. The real hunt was just beginning. Zrakth returned to his ship as the alien sun set behind the mountains. His armor was scratched and his pride was wounded, but he was alive. The human had surprised him with traps and tricks that no prey animal should know. Warlord Kethver waited in the command center with arms crossed over his massive chest. "Where is the proof of kill, Hunter? I expected this to be finished hours ago." Zrakth kept his voice steady despite his frustration. "The human is more challenging than anticipated. He has set multiple traps and knows the terrain better than expected for a new arrival." The warlord's eyes narrowed to yellow slits. "You are making excuses for failure against a single weak human. Perhaps I should send a real hunter to finish this task. Give me 3 more hunters and better equipment. I will bring you his head before the next sunrise." Zrakth's claws extended involuntarily as anger built in his chest. Kethver considered this request. The hunt had become more interesting than expected. "Very well. Take Gorth and Vex and Thane. Use whatever weapons you need, but if you fail again, I will hunt you next." Jake spent the night in a tree hollow 60 feet above the ground. The branches were strong enough to hold his weight, and the height gave him safety from most ground predators. He had learned this lesson on Earth, where sleeping on the forest floor meant becoming something's dinner. The alien jungle came alive after dark with sounds that would terrify most civilized species. Howls and screams and the crash of large animals moving through the undergrowth. Jake listened to it all and began to understand the patterns. There were at least 3 different apex predators in this area. Something large that broke trees when it moved. Something fast that made high-pitched hunting calls. Something else that hunted silently and left only the smell of death behind, but Jake also heard smaller creatures. The sound of insects and birds, and things that might be safe to eat if he could catch them. His emergency rations would not last long, and he needed to find local food sources. When dawn broke, Jake climbed down from his hiding place and began to explore. He moved carefully through the jungle and studied everything around him. The purple barked trees had sap that smelled sweet. Some of the fruits hanging from lower branches looked familiar, enough to risk tasting. Jake found a grove of plants with broad leaves that collected morning dew. The water tasted clean after he ran it through his purification tablets. A small stream nearby had fish that looked normal enough to eat if he could catch them, but most importantly, Jake found signs of the local ecosystem. Animal trails and feeding areas and watering holes. Places where predators would hunt and where prey would try to hide. The jungle had rules just like any environment, and Jake needed to learn them fast. Zrakth led his hunting party back to the crash site at midday. Gorth and Vex were experienced killers who had hunted dozens of species across the galaxy. Thane was younger but eager to prove himself against the human who had embarrassed their leader. The prey uses primitive traps and knows basic survival techniques, Zrath explained as they studied the terrain. He moves through the jungle like he understands it despite being here less than 1 day. Gorth snorted in disgust. You give this human too much credit. No Deathworld species is truly dangerous without claws or natural weapons. We will flush him out and end this quickly. The 4 hunters spread out in formation and began tracking Jake's trail. Their enhanced senses could follow the scent even hours old. Enhanced muscles carried them through terrain that would stop most galactic species. Enhanced reflexes made them deadly in close combat, but Jake had not survived this long by fighting fair. He had spent the morning preparing the jungle for war, the first trap caught Thane when he stepped on a concealed pressure plate. Sharpened stakes driven into the ground pierced his leg armor and sent him crashing into a pit lined with thorns from local plants. The thorns carried toxins that made his enhanced healing work overtime just to keep him alive. Vex tried to help his fallen comrade and triggered the second trap. A counterweight system dropped a massive log across his back and pinned him to the ground. The weight was too much even for enhanced Vorthic strength to lift without leverage. Gorth roared in anger and charged toward where he thought the human was hiding. He ran straight into a snare that lifted him into the air by one massive ankle. Sharp rocks tied to the rope cut into his armor as he swung helplessly from a tree branch. Zrath found himself alone in a jungle that had suddenly become a maze of hidden dangers. Every step might trigger another trap. Every shadow might hide another threat. The human had turned the entire forest into a weapon pointed at them. Jake watched from his concealed position as the alien hunters fell into his traps one by one. These creatures were strong and fast, but they thought like predators who had never faced real resistance. They expected prey to run and hide, not fight back with intelligence and preparation, but Jake knew something they did not understand. On Earth, the apex predator was not the strongest or fastest creature. It was the one that could adapt to any situation and turn any environment to its advantage. Humans had not conquered their homeworld through superior physical abilities, but through superior thinking. The sound of breaking branches announced the arrival of something else. One of the local apex predators had been drawn by the noise and smell of blood from the trapped hunters. Jake heard Thane scream as something large began investigating the pit where he lay wounded. Zrath heard the scream too and felt something he had never experienced before. Fear for the safety of his hunting party. These creatures were supposed to be the perfect predators, but they were being picked apart by a single human and the hostile environment he had learned to use. Jake slipped away from his hiding place and moved to a new position. The jungle predator would keep the alien hunters busy for a while. That gave him time to set more traps and study his enemies further. He had noticed something important during the ambush. The aliens moved like soldiers following tactical training, but they had never faced an enemy who used the environment itself as a weapon. Their armor protected them from claws and energy weapons, but not from hidden pits and falling logs and poisonous thorns. Most importantly, they seemed to have trouble adapting when their plans went wrong. They were used to overwhelming prey with superior force, not dealing with unexpected resistance and creative solutions. Jake found a new hiding spot and began preparing his next surprise. The aliens would free themselves eventually and come looking for revenge. When they did, he would be ready with more lessons about what it meant to be a true apex predator. Zrath managed to rescue his hunters before the local predator finished investigating them. Thane needed medical attention for the toxins in his system. Vex had cracked ribs from the log trap. Gorth was furious and wanted to carpet bomb the entire jungle, but Zrath was beginning to understand that this human was something different. Something that challenged everything the Vorthak believed about strength and survival and what it meant to be the dominant species in the galaxy. Jake had been on the alien world for 5 days when he made a discovery that changed everything. He found Zrath trapped under a fallen tree after the alien hunter had been attacked by one of the local apex predators. The massive creature looked like a cross between a tiger and a tank, with armor plating and claws that could cut through metal. It had ambushed Zrath near a watering hole, and the fight had brought down several trees before the predator retreated with its wounds. Zrath lay pinned under tons of wood with green blood seeping from gashes in his armor. His yellow eyes tracked Jake's movement as the human approached carefully. Both of them knew this could be the end of their deadly game. Jake studied the trapped alien and made a decision that surprised them both. Instead of finishing off his enemy, he began clearing rocks and debris from around the fallen tree. Don't move too much. This thing is balanced wrong and could crush you if it shifts. Zrath watched in confusion as his prey worked to free him. Why do you help me, human? I have hunted you for days. I will continue to hunt you when I am free. Jake used a thick branch as a lever to lift part of the tree trunk. Maybe, but right now you're hurt and trapped, and that makes you somebody who needs help. We can go back to trying to kill each other later. It took 2 hours of careful work, but Jake managed to create enough space for Zrath to crawl free. The alien hunter was battered and bleeding, but alive. His right arm hung useless. At his side, and deep cuts marked his chest and legs. Your armor is breached in 3 places and you're losing too much blood, Jake said as he examined the wounds. We need to get you patched up before infection sets in. Zrath tried to understand this behavior. In Vorthic society, the strong survived and the weak died. Enemies were killed without mercy or hesitation. Helping a wounded opponent was not just strange, it was incomprehensible. Jake led the injured alien to a cave he had prepared as a backup shelter. Inside were supplies he had gathered from the jungle and equipment salvaged from the crash site. He lit a small fire and began heating water in a metal container. Sit down before you fall down, Jake ordered as he prepared basic medical supplies. I'm going to clean those cuts and try to stop the bleeding. This might hurt, but it's better than dying from infection. Zrath sat heavily on a flat rock and watched Jake work. The human moved with practiced efficiency as he cleaned wounds and applied pressure bandages. You have medical training, basic field medicine. Marines learn to patch up wounded soldiers until real medics can take over. Jake worked on the deepest cut across Zrath's chest. What's your name anyway? I'm getting tired of thinking of you as the big scary alien. I'm called Zrath of the 7th Hunting Pack. The alien winced as Jake cleaned debris from his wounds. You are Jake Morrison according to your ship records. Jake nodded and continued working. So Zrath, tell me why your people want to kill all humans. What did we do to make enemies of the great Vorthic Empire? Zrath considered how to explain the natural order of the galaxy to this strange human. We are the apex predators. We rule because we are the strongest and most perfect warriors. Humans are weak prey animals from a hostile world. You must be eliminated before you spread your weakness to other species. Weak prey animals. Jake tied off a bandage and moved to the next wound. Is that what we look like to you? No claws or fangs or natural armor, so we must be helpless. Yes, your species survived on a Deathworld, but you did not become strong. You remain soft and vulnerable. This proves you are not true predators. Zrath watched Jake's hands as they worked on his injuries. Yet you fight like something else entirely. Jake sat back and looked at his patient. You want to know what humans really are, Zrath? We're not the biggest or strongest or fastest things on Earth, but we're still the apex predator, because we can adapt to anything and use everything around us as a tool or weapon. Adaptation? Zrath tested the word in his mouth. We adapted ourselves through genetic enhancement to become perfect warriors. That's modification, not adaptation. Real adaptation means changing your behavior and thinking to fit new situations. Using your brain instead of just your muscles. Jake added wood to the fire. Watch this. Jake picked up a simple stick and showed Zrath how it could become a lever or a probe or a weapon depending on how it was used. Then he combined it with a rock to make a hammer. Then he added rope made from plant fibers to create a snare or climbing aid. Humans learn to see potential in everything around us. This jungle wants to kill us both, but I've learned to make it work for me instead. Food and water and shelter and weapons, all from the same environment that's trying to eat us? Zrath, watched this demonstration with growing understanding. His people had become so focused on physical perfection that they had lost the ability to truly adapt. They used technology and brute force to overcome challenges instead of learning to work with their environment. "Your traps?" Drake said slowly. "You did not bring those weapons with you. You made them from what you found here. Everything I needed was already in the jungle. I just had to figure out how to use it." Jake checked the bandages on Drake's wounds. "Your people are impressive warriors, but you think like hunters who have never had to be hunted. You expect prey to run and hide, not fight back with creativity." For 3 days they shared the cave while Zrath recovered from his injuries. Jake taught the alien about human survival techniques and philosophy. Zrath explained Vorthic culture and their belief in genetic superiority. "We have conquered 47 worlds," Zrath said as Jake prepared a meal from local plants and fish. "Our strength is proven by victory after victory." Strength. Jake stirred the cooking pot. "What happens when you meet something stronger than you, something that can't be defeated by claws and muscle?" Zrath had no answer for that question. The Vorthak had never considered the possibility of meeting a superior force because they believed themselves to be the ultimate evolution of predator species. On the 4th morning, their philosophical discussions were interrupted by the sound of orbital bombardment. Warlord Kethver had grown tired of waiting for results and decided to carpet bomb the jungle to flush out the human. Explosions shook the ground as energy beams carved burning paths through the forest. Trees burst into flame and entire sections of jungle disappeared in clouds of superheated plasma. The bombardment was moving systematically toward their hiding place. "He will kill us both if we stay here," Drake said as he tested his wounded arm. Kethver does not care about collateral damage. Jake grabbed his gear and helped Drake to his feet. "Then we better move fast. I know a place where we might survive this, but it's going to be dangerous even by Deathworld standards." They ran through the burning jungle as explosions chased them toward the volcanic region Jake had discovered during his exploration. Behind them, the forest died in fire and smoke. Ahead lay thermal vents and lava flows and toxic gases that could kill them both, but Jake had learned something during his time on this world. Sometimes the most dangerous place was also the safest because enemies would not expect you to go there voluntarily. Zrath followed the human into hell and began to understand what it really meant to be an apex predator. It was not about being the strongest or most perfectly designed killer. It was about being willing and able to go places and do things that no sane creature would attempt just to survive another day as they reached the relative safety of a cave system near the volcanic vents. Zrath realized something that would change his entire worldview. For the first time in his life, he felt safer working with another creature than he would have felt alone. The human's ability to adapt and find solutions was more valuable than all his enhanced strength and weapons. The hunt had become something else entirely. Neither of them was prey anymore. They had become something new. The orbital bombardment had awakened something ancient and terrible in the volcanic regions of the moon. Jake and Zrath crouched in their cave shelter as the ground shook with footsteps that were not caused by explosions. "What is that sound?" Zrath whispered as his enhanced hearing picked up movement outside their hiding place. Jake peered through a crack in the cave wall and felt his blood turn cold. A creature the size of a building was moving through the lava fields with purpose and intelligence. Its hide was black volcanic glass that reflected the firelight. 6 eyes like burning coals swept the landscape as it searched for the source of the bombardment. "That's what your people woke up," Jake said quietly. "I saw signs of these things during my first week here, but they stayed deep in the volcanic region. The bombing must have disturbed their territory." The creature was 200 feet long with legs like tree trunks and a tail that could level buildings. But most terrifying was the obvious intelligence in those burning eyes. This was not a mindless beast, but an apex predator that had ruled this world for millions of years. In the Vorthic base camp 20 kilometers away, Warlord Kethver watched his sensors with growing alarm. The massive creature was moving directly toward their position, and nothing in their arsenal seemed capable of stopping it. "Sir, the energy weapons are not penetrating its hide," reported his weapons officer. "The creature appears to be using the volcanic environment to absorb and redirect our attacks." Kethver snarled in frustration. "Increase firepower. Bring all orbital platforms to bear. That thing cannot be immune to everything we have." But the bombardment only seemed to anger the ancient predator. It moved faster now, crushing burning trees under massive feet as it closed the distance to the Vorthic camp. Energy beams that could melt through starship armor barely marked its crystalline hide. Jake watched the distant battle through his improvised telescope and saw something the Vorthic could not. The creature was not just randomly angry. It was displaying specific territorial behaviors and responding to the orbital weapons as a threat to its domain. "Your people are fighting it wrong," Jake told Zrak as explosions lit up the sky. "They're treating it like an enemy to be destroyed instead of an intelligent creature defending its territory." Zrak studied the distant beast through his own enhanced vision. "What do you mean?" "It is attacking our base camp. How should we respond if not with overwhelming force?" Jake pointed to the creature's movement patterns. "Look at how it's approaching. Not in a straight line, but following the thermal vents and lava flows. It's using the environment for protection and energy absorption. This thing has been fighting volcanic eruptions and geological disasters for eons. Your weapons are just another environmental hazard to it." The truth was becoming clear to both of them. This creature was what a true apex predator looked like. Not something designed in a laboratory for maximum killing potential, but something that had evolved to survive anything the universe could throw at it. "We have to help them," Zrak said as he watched his fellow warriors dying in the distance. "Even if they would not do the same for us." Jake was already gathering his gear. "I have an idea, but it's going to require both of us working together. Your strength and my planning. Can you trust a human to save your people?" Zraka met Jake's eyes and saw something there that surprised him. Determination and intelligence and a willingness to risk everything for creatures who had been trying to kill him. "I trust you, Jake Morrison." They left the safety of their cave and began moving through the volcanic landscape toward the battle. Jake led the way, following paths that avoided the worst of the heat and toxic gases. His experience with hostile environments guided them safely through terrain that would have killed most galactic species. "The creature is using the lava flows to power itself," Jake explained as they climbed over cooling volcanic rock. "See how its hide glows brighter when it passes near the thermal vents? It's not just immune to the heat, it's feeding on it." Zrak H began to understand Jake's plan. "You want to cut it off from its power source." "Not cut it off, redirect it." Jake pointed to a series of cooling lava tubes that led away from the battle zone. "If we can convince it that the threat has moved elsewhere, it might follow the thermal energy away from your people." They reached a position above the main lava flow that fed the creature's energy absorption. Jake had studied the geological formations during his time hiding in this region. With the right pressure applied in the right place, they could redirect the flow into the abandoned tube system. "This is insane even by Deathworld standards," Zrak H said as he looked at Jake's plan. "You want to cause a controlled volcanic eruption to save the people who are trying to kill you." Jake was already placing explosive charges salvaged from Vorthak equipment. Sometimes the craziest plan is the only one that works. Besides, your people aren't evil, just wrong about what strength really means. The plan required precise timing and coordination. Zrak used his enhanced strength to position massive rock formations while Jake calculated blast angles and energy redirections. They worked together like a precision team despite being from different worlds and different species. When the charges detonated, the effect was immediate and dramatic. The main lava flow shifted direction and began pouring into the abandoned tube system. The ancient creature felt its primary energy source moving away from the battle zone. For a moment it paused in its attack on the Vorthak base and turned toward the new thermal signature. Those burning eyes studied the redirected lava flow with obvious intelligence. Then slowly the massive predator began following its food source away from the dying warriors. The Vorthak base camp fell silent as their impossible enemy walked away into the volcanic depths. Warlord Kethver stared at his sensors in confusion. Victory had come not through superior firepower, but through environmental manipulation beyond his understanding. Jake and Zrath watched from their hidden position as the creature disappeared into the lava tubes. The immediate threat was over, but both of them knew this was just the beginning of something larger. "Your people will want to know how this happened," Jake said as they began the journey back to safer ground. "What will you tell them?" Zrath considered this question carefully. "I will tell them the truth. That a human Deathworlder accomplished what our enhanced warriors could not. That true predator behavior is not about dominating through force, but about adapting to any situation and finding creative solutions." They made camp that night in a cave overlooking the Vorthak base. Jake prepared food while Zrath used his communication equipment to contact his superiors. The conversation was tense and filled with disbelief. "You claim the human redirected volcanic energy to drive away the creature?" came Kethver's voice. "Through static. This is impossible. Deathworld species do not have the intelligence for such complex planning." Zrath looked at Jake, who was calmly preparing their meal using techniques learned from studying the local ecosystem. "Perhaps we have been wrong about Deathworld species. Perhaps we have been wrong about many things." The transmission ended with Kethver's angry demands for immediate capture and return of the human for study. But Zrath was no longer listening to orders that made no sense. He had seen something that challenged everything the Vorthak believed about evolution and survival. Jake offered him a portion of the cooked food. "So what happens now? Do you go back to hunting me, or do we figure out something else?" Zrath accepted the meal and tasted flavors that were completely alien but somehow perfect for this environment. "I think we figure out something else, Jake Morrison. Something that has never been tried before in the history of the galaxy." Outside their cave, the ancient predator sang to itself in the volcanic depths, a sound like mountains grinding together, that spoke of patience and endurance and the wisdom that came from surviving everything the universe could create. The true apex predator had returned to its domain, leaving behind two very different creatures who had learned to see the galaxy through new eyes. The human rescue fleet arrived at Kepler 442c 3 weeks after the crash of the UES Horizon. Commander Lisa Park stood on the bridge of the UES Defender, watching long-range sensors detect both human and Vorthak signatures on the moon's surface. "Ma'am, we're picking up Vorthak battle formations moving to intercept," reported her tactical officer. "They have us outnumbered 3-1 and outgunned by a significant margin." Lisa studied the enemy fleet disposition with calm professionalism. "Any word from the surface about survivors?" "Negative, ma'am. No response to our hails, but the Vorthak jamming is pretty heavy. If anyone is alive down there, we won't know until we break through their blockade." The Vorthak fleet moved with predatory confidence toward the human ships. Warlord Kethver commanded from his flagship, expecting an easy victory over the weak Deathworld species. He planned to use any human survivors as hostages to demonstrate Vorthak's superiority, but Kethver had not counted on Zrath's change of perspective. The hunter who had spent weeks learning from Jake Morrison was no longer the same creature who had dropped from orbit to kill a single human survivor on the moon's surface. Jake and Zrath watched the orbital battle begin through improvised telescopes. Energy beams crossed the darkness between ships as fighters launched and defensive screens activated. "Your people fight differently than mine," Zrath observed as he studied the human fleet tactics. "They coordinate like a pack hunting together, instead of individual predators competing for kills." Jake nodded as he watched Commander Park's ships execute complex maneuvers that would have been impossible without precise coordination. "Humans learned a long time ago that working together makes us stronger than the sum of our parts. We call it teamwork." The space battle demonstrated everything Jake had been trying to explain about human adaptation and cooperation. When Vorthak ships concentrated firepower to break through defensive screens, human ships redistributed their energy to compensate. When fighters attacked from multiple vectors, human Pilots covered each other with overlapping fields of fire. Dr. Alex Chen monitored the battle from the UES Defender's science station while analyzing data about Vorthak combat techniques. Commander, their tactics are focused on individual ship superiority. Each vessel fights like it expects to win or lose based on its own capabilities. Lisa used this information to coordinate her fleet response. Human ships that suffered battle damage were immediately supported by others. Crews adapted to system failures with improvised solutions that kept them in the fight. The entire fleet functioned like a single organism with many specialized parts. Warlord Kethfer watched his superior forces struggle against the coordinated human response with growing frustration. Individual Vorthak ships were more powerful, but the humans fought as an integrated unit that maximized their combined strength. Focus fire on their command ship, Kethfer ordered. Cut off their coordination, and they will fall apart like all prey species. But when the Vorthak concentrated their attacks on the UES Defender, other human ships immediately moved to protect it. Command functions transferred seamlessly to backup vessels while damage control teams kept the flagship operational despite heavy damage. Jake felt a communication device vibrate in his pocket. Zraith had given him a Vorthak transmitter that could reach the fleet if used carefully. This was the moment of truth. Zraith H, this is your last chance, Jake said quietly. Help me contact my people or watch both our fleets destroy each other. For no good reason. Zraith looked at his new ally and made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. He activated his command codes and opened a communication channel to both fleets simultaneously. This is Zraith of the 7th. Hunting pack speaking to all vessels. Cease fire immediately. I have urgent information that will prevent unnecessary deaths on both sides. Warlord Kethfer's voice exploded through the channel filled with rage and disbelief. Zraith, you dare interfere with this battle. Explain yourself or be branded a traitor to the Empire. Jake took the transmitter and spoke directly to both fleets. This is Marine Jake Morrison, survivor of the UES Horizon. I'm calling for a temporary ceasefire so we can share information that affects both our species. Commander Park's voice came through clearly despite the jamming. Jake Morrison, good to hear you're alive. What's your situation down there? I'm with a Vorthak hunter who saved my life and helped me survive. We've learned some things about each. Other that change everything we thought we knew about this conflict. The space battle slowed as both fleets processed this impossible information. A human and Vorthak working together was beyond anything either side had considered possible. Zraith took the transmitter back and addressed his own people. Warlord Kethfer, I have observed human capabilities for weeks. They are not weak prey animals. They are apex predators who use intelligence and cooperation instead of individual strength. We have been wrong about them. Impossible, Kethfer snarled. No Deathworld species can match Vorthak genetic perfection. You have been corrupted by prolonged exposure to inferior creatures. Jake spoke up again. 3 weeks ago, I would have agreed that we're completely different species with nothing in common. But I've learned that being a true predator isn't about having the biggest claws or strongest muscles. It's about adapting to survive anything the universe throws at you. Dr. Chun had been analyzing the conversation with growing excitement. Commander, this could be the breakthrough we've been hoping for. First contact with a reasonable Vorthak faction. Lisa made a command decision that would echo through history. All ships stand down to defensive positions only. Do not fire unless fired upon. Let's see where this goes. Some Vorthak commanders followed Kethfer's orders to continue the attack, but others hesitated. The idea that a respected hunter like Zraith H could form an alliance with human prey challenged their fundamental beliefs about the natural order on the moon's surface. Jake and Zraith continued their broadcast to both fleets. They described their experiences together and what they had learned about cooperation and adaptation. Jake explained human pack hunting techniques while Zraith shared Vorthak philosophy and culture. Elder Theshra listened to these revelations. From her position on the Vorthak council ship, she was old enough to remember when her people valued balance and wisdom instead of just genetic superiority. Perhaps it is time to reconsider our assumptions about strength. The breakthrough came when Jake described how they had defeated the ancient volcanic creature through environmental manipulation instead of direct combat. This accomplishment impressed even the most traditionalist Vorthok commanders who understood the impossibility of such a feat. You redirected volcanic energy to drive away a planetary apex predator, Elder Theshra said with wonder in her voice. Such coordination between different species has never been recorded in galactic history. Warlord Kethver saw his authority slipping away as more of his commanders began questioning their orders. This changes nothing. Humans remain inferior prey animals regardless of their tricks and deceptions. But Zrake had one final argument that would convince his people. Warlord, I challenge you to single combat to prove which philosophy is correct. Your genetic enhancement against the alliance I have formed with this human. The challenge was broadcast to both fleets and created an impossible situation for Kethver. Refusing would show weakness, while accepting meant fighting alongside the human he despised. Jake understood what Zrake was offering. Together we're stronger than either of us alone. That's the lesson this whole experience has been trying to teach both our species. The duel never happened because the ancient predator chose that moment to emerge from the volcanic depths and sing its mountain-grinding song across the moon's surface. Both fleets detected the massive creature and realized that some things were beyond the ability of any single species to comprehend or control. In that moment of shared wonder at something truly alien, both humans and Vorthok began to understand that the galaxy was large enough for different kinds of apex predators. Some ruled through strength and others through adaptation, but both had value in the endless struggle for survival. The war did not end that day, but it changed forever. Zrake and Jake became symbols of a new possibility where different species could learn from each other instead of simply destroying what they did not understand. Commander Park authorized the first joint human Vorthok research mission to study the ancient creatures of Kepler 442c. Dr. Chun worked alongside Vorthok scientists to document species that had survived since the dawn of the galaxy. And in the volcanic depths, the true apex predators sang their ancient songs. While two very different creatures learned that evolution had many paths to the same destination. Survival was not about being the strongest, but about being strong enough to adapt when the universe demanded change.